My name is Brenda Thorne. I am 31 years old, and last week, I stepped into a room filled with relatives who spent 13 years erasing me from existence, only to watch me walk away with everything. At my grandfather's will reading, the family divided millions. My father inherited a sprawling estate, and my brother took over the firm. I was handed a single weathered envelope containing nothing but a phone number. My brother smirked so widely his drink nearly spilled across the polished table, muttering that it must be a link to a homeless shelter, which suited my current lifestyle perfectly. In response, I did exactly what none of them anticipated. I pulled out my mobile phone, entered the digits, and activated the speakerphone for everyone in the room to hear. The individual on the other end stated a specific name, a massive financial sum, and a professional designation that belonged exclusively to me. Instantly, every single face around that table turned pale. Before I explain the rest of this story, let me take you back to how this entire situation began. It started on the chilly morning my grandfather passed away, and my phone lit up with a contact I had not seen in 3 long years. The notification arrived at 5 in the morning, while I was reviewing carpentry blueprints at my workshop in the valley. My phone vibrated with an unfamiliar number, and I nearly ignored it before finally pressing answer. It was my Aunt Clara informing me that my grandfather had left us the previous evening. She mentioned the legal meeting was scheduled for Wednesday in the city, adding that my father had intentionally left me off the attendee list, but she felt I deserved to know. After disconnecting, I stared at the solitary photograph hanging on my office wall, showing Harold Thorne and a 16-year-old version of myself pouring concrete together, both of us smiling broadly. My father, Marcus Thorne, the head of Thorne Realty, had publicly disowned me when I turned 18 during a company holiday celebration in front of dozens of prominent clients. My supposed offense was telling him that I preferred constructing homes rather than selling them, leading me to join the military the very next day. Following that night, Marcus wiped me from every family album, holiday greeting card, and legal document, while my brother Austin ensured I remained isolated. Austin managed grandfather's communication, filtering his guests and claiming the old man wanted nothing to do with me. That was a complete fabrication, as Harold sent me 47 handwritten letters over more than a decade, starting with my first week at the military barracks. Once I completed my service, we quietly met every single month at an old roadside diner, completely hidden from the rest of the family. I dialed Aunt Clara back to confirm that despite the lack of an invitation, I would absolutely be attending the gathering. 3 months prior to his passing, Harold and I sat in our usual booth at that diner, sharing the same meal we always ordered. He was 84 and visibly thinner, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for his glass, though his blue-gray eyes remained remarkably sharp. He asked about my construction business, and I told him I now managed a crew of 6 and was expanding into commercial roofing. He nodded proudly, noting that I understood the value of manual labor, unlike my brother who never respected hard work. Leaning across the table, he lowered his voice and told me he was restructuring his affairs for when he passed away. He instructed me to trust a man named Vance who would reach out to me when the time arrived. When I questioned him about the details, he simply shook his head, explaining that he merely wanted me to know he never agreed with my father's cruelty. He squeezed my wrist with surprising strength before I departed, and looking back through my mirror, I saw him standing alone against the horizon. That was the final time we spoke, and he never mentioned Vance again, leaving me with questions I should have asked. The legal offices in the city were grand, smelling of expensive woodwork and old wealth, an environment designed to showcase status. I parked my dented utility truck directly between Austin's luxury sedan and my father's expensive coupe, completely unbothered by the visual contrast. Walking inside wearing my clean work flannel, denim jeans, and polished leather boots, I bypassed the hesitant receptionist by firmly stating my identity. I pushed open the heavy doors of the boardroom, causing 8 heads to instantly turn toward me in utter surprise. My father sat at the head of the table, his expression tightening instantly, while Austin smiled mockingly as if an unwanted guest had ruined a high-end dinner. My stepmother placed a cautioning hand on my father's arm as he sharply demanded to know who had authorized my presence. I calmly responded that nobody had invited me, but my relationship with Harold gave me every legal right to occupy a seat. The family attorney adjusted his spectacles, calmly informing my father that my name was explicitly noted in the documentation, making my presence entirely valid. My father pressed his palms flat against the wood, reluctantly telling me to sit down as the lawyer opened the folder. The attorney began reading the allocations with the detached precision of someone who had performed this ritual countless times before. My father received the primary family residence along with nearly $1 million in liquid currency, accepting the news with a cold nod. Austin was granted full control of Thorn Realty, a massive investment portfolio, and a substantial cash payout, immediately logging the details into his device. My stepmother received her designated funds and a luxury vehicle, dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue she had kept ready. Various younger relatives were awarded educational trusts, and since the distributions matched expectations, no one raised an objection. Finally, the attorney turned to the final page, announcing an independent delivery intended solely for me. He slid the yellowed, worn envelope across the table, revealing my name written in my grandfather's distinct, precise block lettering. Upon opening it, I found a solitary piece of paper displaying a 10-digit telephone number and a brief note telling me to call Vance. Austin caught sight of the paper and laughed loudly, mocking the lack of a traditional inheritance in front of the entire room. The rest of the relatives offered quiet smirks, while Aunt Clara remained silent near the window, watching me with the same steady patience Harold used to possess. The attorney clarified that the contents of the envelope existed completely outside the jurisdiction of the standard will. Hearing that, I quietly pulled my device from my pocket, placed it directly on the mahogany surface, and began inputting the numbers. Austin stopped laughing, demanding to know what I was doing as the speaker tone began echoing through the quiet boardroom. After a few rings, a deep, weathered voice answered, identifying himself as Vance and stating that Harold had prepared him for this exact moment. The room fell entirely silent, the background noise vanishing as Vance announced he held the legal deeds for Thorn Holdings LLC. He explained that my grandfather had established this entity independently a decade ago, naming me as the sole managing successor. Vance revealed that the current valuation of the commercial real estate assets inside the holding company was approximately $42 million. Austin placed his glass down so slowly his hand trembled, while my father stared blankly at the phone in total disbelief. I thanked Vance, promised to meet him the following morning, and disconnected the call before looking across the table at the stunned faces. I asked if anyone cared to make another joke about my inheritance, but the room remained frozen in absolute silence. My father stood up unsteadily, his voice cracking with a weakness I had never heard from him in my entire life. That specific moment provided the exact validation I had searched for since the night I was cast out at 18. It was never about the vast wealth, but rather the look of absolute defeat on their faces when they realized their cruelty had failed. Austin suddenly erupted in anger, slamming his fist down and shouting that the arrangement was fraudulent and must be contested. The attorney intervened, explaining that if the corporate entity was structured correctly, the assets remained entirely separate from the personal estate. My father furiously turned on the lawyer, who defended himself by stating Harold had utilized an independent legal team to establish the entity. Austin paced frantically, realizing the holding company was worth more than double the family brokerage he had just inherited. I gathered the envelope, calmly stating that Harold had built his empire using private capital completely independent of the family firm. My father glared at me, asking if I had been aware of this scheme, to which I truthfully replied that I discovered it at the exact same moment they did. As the family argued and threatened litigation, I walked out into the bright afternoon heat, knowing this conflict was only just beginning.